Z are wrong. We love you and politics of
But America,
and love are right.
we are not going back.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Raised Red Living Blue podcast. I've got a special guest here today. He's really a famous influencer in Alabama.
I wouldn't say famous.
Yeah.
Almost famous.
Almost famous.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, you got a huge following on social. You're over 100,000 on TikTok.
Right.
I'm not sure about all the other platforms, but...
They're just like regular, just 500 or something.
Okay, so TikTok just took off.
TikTok just took off.
Yeah, well, I think this is important to point out. I mean, people are going to look at you and go, wait a minute, that guy's not one of us? He's not a MAGA? Like, how do people react when they found out that, like, this purebred Alabama boy is a founding member of the Mobile chapter of DSA?
Yeah, some people would take back on it, and I think that kind of depends on where their hate level is, just how much they, don't agree with the views that I possess. It goes to show that no matter how you look and how you present and how you perform your gender, you can still hold a mindset for a better future. You know what I'm saying? Even if you because I don't look like this all the time. It depends on if I'm at work, in overalls and welding stuff or whatever, But at the end of the day, looking a certain way doesn't mean that you have to harbor those views of hate and stuff like that, which is, I think, what a lot of the MAGA platform is based on. Is it's not about inclusiveness. It's more about like othering a group of people or several groups of people.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, how you developed such an independent mindset. I know your mom was really influential in that, but just to give you like some background on me, like I was raised in a Republican household, and there was something to the we're better than others type thing that made you feel good. Like if I got in trouble, if I did something bad, like if I got busted with weed or something, I knew I wasn't going to jail for 90 days or a year or however long. I knew they weren't going to lock me up and throw away the key. And I just remember that was ever present, that we were different just because we were white. Mm-hmm. And I know we're going to talk a lot about, or at least some of that, how you've experienced racism, witnessed it firsthand. But tell us about your mom. She's been such a big figure in your life.
Well, I was raised by a single mother, one of four youngins, and without a lot of money at all, so there wasn't a lot of new stuff, there wasn't a lot of extra trips or things like that, but there was like always enough. There was always, so my mother, we had a house of love, when she passed, my sister and I added it up, and at 28 people at one time or another, like slept at my mom's house and called it home to some degree. They had clothes in the dresser, wow. They had meals in the pantry type of thing. You could always go to my mama's house no matter who you were or where you came from and get a hot meal and lay down, So that's the kind of household that I came from. Even there wasn't a lot, but it was all of ours to have. You know what I mean? It was the most that could get done with what we had was what we were doing. And so it wasn't like she had one car, we had one car.
Yeah.
Type of thing. And so it didn't matter if you were LGBTQIA plus or if you were black or brown or wherever you came from in the social world that we have, you were loved and accepted in this house. That don't mean that you weren't accepted everywhere, because you could go out and, depending on how you were dressed or how you looked, you might get looked at by other people, maybe by your parents or something. But like at my house, you got treated the same as I got treated, and everybody else got treated the same, with love and knowing that like she was raising a generation of people, type of thing. So
was that obvious, or did she have to kind of lay down some ground rules like, hey, because there may have been, there could have been a racist who was down on their luck.
Right.
Did they just kind of feel that in the ecosystem? Like, hey, this is a safe place.
I don't know if it was that as much as like, because looking back, I couldn't deconstruct that at 10 or 12 or 14, right?
Yeah.
But you never wanted to do us to others as you didn't want done to you, right? That was a big thing. But it was also about like, she would teach you how to think about the thing, not what to think. She wouldn't say this is right and this is wrong. She would say, why do you feel this way? And how did you reach this conclusion? Like if I'm doing something bad or if I'm doing something good, it's more about like, how did you get here on your own thought process instead of this is the cut and dry, this is what you have to do because you're this, and then my sister has to do it this way because she's a girl or a woman,
Right.
It was all about reaching the outcome through your own thought process and your own thinking. And I think that helps me a lot as a grown adult, just like, how do I want to be treated is how I'm treating other people, and not just what to think, but how to think about the thing that we're working through, whether it's a small problem or a big problem.
Wow.
So
was she outspoken, or was there a catalyst in your life that led you to be as outspoken as you are? Because I'm sure, as we all find out, when we speak against the establishment, we lose relationships or we get demonized ourselves.
Right.
Was there something in your life that you're like, I just can't be silent anymore?
Yeah, I probably have a couple of points of that, but like knowing how I got treated and how I came up, and knowing that like no child in Alabama or other places should have to be raised in a poverty level that I was at. And then once I became an adult and then realized that like, you know what, I kind of had it pretty decent, you know what I'm saying? Like I didn't have it as bad as somebody else. And to think about that system is constantly getting worse now, that's been 20 plus years ago. It's like we've got to do something, and if we don't, then it's going to continue to get worse. There's more children being raised like I was raised than when I was raised, and I don't agree with the way that I had to come up. The lack of transportation, or the lack of, I didn't have a stake until I was almost out of high school. I graduated high school, which is, some people don't get to do that, and so we have to work on that. And if we don't, then there's going to end up being a more of an issue, a more of a disconnect to society. There's somebody that's particular. I started work at 20 years old at the shipyard in Pascagoula. The first fellow that I worked with was a guy named T.J. Ray.
Yeah.
Mr. Ray was 68-year-old black man that he was born in like 1940, went to school at Tuskegee, and had lived in a segregated South and had grown up in the way that you read about in history books, not that you experience.
Right.
And so this guy that I worked with 5 days a week, ate lunch with him, and he was showing me. I was, of course, young and fresh, hot on the job, wanted to know everything and learn everything I could. And he was not bashful about teaching and showing me. And the more that kind of connection happened, the more that I understood that like the man standing in front of me didn't have to spend the time to do those things. He could have held a lot of contempt and hate for the opportunity that I was being given that he wasn't offered to, or even his grandchildren might not be offered to, because I was in a cushy spot, working there. So realizing that, and that system still is to some degree in place from a segregated South we're not that far removed from, you know. And there's plenty of examples that we see in every single day. And it's like, if we, the people that have voices, or the people that can see it, aren't speaking out against it, and we're just and that's kind of what my mom was. She was just like, nose to the grindstone and do what she can do in her own little box. And my box is bigger now. So I'm going to try to do what I can, to speak out against it and to change the system to where it's one that we can be proud of, not one that we can just shrug our shoulders and say, we ain't got to love it, but it is what it is. That's just the way we're going to be, And what am I going to do, So.
Well, that's the Republican way, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it's incredibly broken. I feel like we're in this unique kind of place and time right now where a voice like yours, who brings the facts, the arguments, is having constructive conversations, really breaking it down for people. Like, we're in this unique position for people, I think, to receive the information, because the Republican Party, or just both parties in a lot of ways, have been exposed. Their hypocrisies have been exposed. For example, Republican Party traditionally has been the party of like family values, Christian values. Well, that's all bullshit.
Right.
They've been totally exposed, I feel like. And so when it's so in your face that like, wow, this has all been maybe a bunch of smoke and mirrors. Mm-hmm. That's where, because Democrats, especially socialists, you want to talk about demonized. I mean, I'm sure you get told you hate America a bunch of times every day.
Right. Yeah. So I am just an open socialist, and that's a big tent word for basically people over profits is what socialism in my own terms means in just the black and white. If you're caring about the way that people move in society and making a society that's better for people, then that's socialist policies, because capitalism is a profit driver over anything else. And profit never takes care of the people that it needs to take care of, just like the economy doesn't take care of people, right? The stock market doesn't take care of people, but the people working inside of these systems take care of people, right? The fisherman, the school teacher, the nurse, those are the people that take care of people. And all of those are like little bitty ticks inside the economy. And the way that our current structure that Democrats and Republicans kind of uphold is the economy and the stock market and stuff like that. Where at the end of the day, if we just flip that and say, let's just take care of the people. Let's make sure that the nurse has good transportation. Let's make sure that the fisherman's children get to go to school. Let's make sure that everybody that goes to work is working class, because that's a bigger, broader picture. Just because you can't work doesn't mean that you shouldn't be taken care of. Disability or old age or children, all those people are working class. So let's just make a system that focuses on taking care of the needs of people. And then people themselves are going to do the things that they do. The way that you let somebody borrow a vehicle, or you give them a ride, or you watch their kids, or if they're sick, you run them groceries. But now we have Uber to do those things, or we have grocery delivery from Walmart, which helps capitalism, but it doesn't help people, because now we have to pay for a service that we used to do as Southern folks. We used to just give tomatoes out of the garden. But now watermelons are $10 and you just go buy one of those. It's easier to just go buy one. Well, what happens when we run out of $10? We still need these tomatoes and and corn, and I talk about socialism like nobody shells peas anymore. You know what I mean? Like, we've gotten away from the things that take care of people, right? Selling peas for profit doesn't feed anybody, but growing peas to give away feeds a bunch of folks. And shelling peas, even if you don't eat those peas, are going to make sure that other people are getting fed too. You might enjoy the community time that you get to shell the peas, but the bigger picture is that people are being taken care of instead of profits being made.
Well, I want to, instead of, and let me know if you think this is fair, for the duration of this podcast, I don't think the label needs to be Republican versus Democrat. I think it's just capitalism versus socialism. Let's break it down, because there's plenty of Democrats, plenty of independents that are not pro-life in the definition of your pro-life. Like, I love when you get on TikTok and you're like, you can't be pro-life if you stand for this. You can't be pro-life and not, support this. But Jesus certainly wasn't a capitalist. I feel like you're somebody of a man of faith. At least I've seen you quote scripture on Sundays.
So I don't so openly talk about faith and not faith, because that shouldn't be the denomination of where we judge somebody at. But being raised in the South, everybody's got some degree of, even if they condemn it completely now, and everybody that reads the Bible or upholds Christianity, they don't uphold all of it, right? Because there's plenty of verses that talk about mass murder and, pillaging and disdain for women and stuff like that, but they will uphold gay marriage as an abomination. Well, let's talk about Jesus feeding and bread and fish to people. Let's talk about that verse instead of, whether or not. So I just try to uphold, like you said, Jesus was a progressive. He was taken to the cross by the state, by an authoritarian figure, right? Like, that's kind of the crux of, so the state said, you will do this or else, which is the system that we have now. If you don't do this, then you will be crucified, and that's the socialist way. Like, we don't agree with the way that capitalism is dividing and forcing people into poverty and Homelessness is a construct, right? We have more houses than people. We have more cars than people. So why are people without rides? We have more food than people that need to be fed. So that goes into a different spot that I talk about with real resources and fiat resources, which is the money, which is the economy, the system that we built around to kind of like distribute resources. But real resources are plentiful. There's plenty of people that work and go to work and work longer hours than we probably need to. There's more food than we need. There's all these things. The real resources are there, but the system that we have to relegate it is what the problem is, right? So that's what socialism strives to fix is the system of distribution where everybody has enough. Not everybody has the same, but everybody has this basic standard that's acceptable and deserving of life, instead of saying, well, tough noogie, right? Because that's how you can't say that you are a Jesus follower and then look at somebody that's without or hasn't had the same life experience as you and say, that's your own fault. It's not my problem that you were born and your mother was a single person. She chose wrong. It's not my fault that you had a 30 or 40 mile ride to school every day and the bus didn't come or you didn't have this. And so it's not my fault that you didn't get a good education. It's not my fault that there's some public schools in Alabama that allocate $20,000 a year to a child's education and some that allocate $9,000. And at the end of the day, they're supposed to be on the same level playing field. It's not the child's fault that double the amount of resources were spent. But these people, mainly Republicans, especially Christ-following Republicans, they say, or capitalists, they say, well, it's the child, that's by the bootstraps. It's the child's, I know that you may have been raised that way, but at the end of the day, it's you're an adult now and just work with it. And the system is meant to divide us, cut us up, plot us against each other. And so we spend all of our time talking about bathrooms. And we spend all this time talking about if two men can get married, where there's a lot more folks that are without than are with,
Hey, fellow Blue Dots, we would love for you to connect with us on social media. We're on Instagram and TikTok at Raised Red Living Blue. Okay, back to the episode.
It's funny to me, you said Jesus was a progressive. It's funny how they twist these words. Like on our side, we have woke, like woke means awake. Obviously, progressive is self-explanatory. I mean, what's wrong with progress?
Right.
Antifa. Like,
right.
I mean, shouldn't everybody be an anti-fascist?
You would think. You would think. Everybody, if you're a patriot, right? Not a nationalist, but a patriot. If you have love for your country, then you should be pro-democracy. And the DSA kind of wants to take democracy to the next level. Instead of just elected officials being able to move and stuff like that, which the easiest way to explain super democracy, pro-democracy, more democracy than we have now is at the job site, is at the job. If there's one boss and 4 workers, should the boss get to just kind of move however they want to move and the workers deal with it? Or should they all have like a meeting in the morning time around coffee or once a week or once a month and like, hey, this is what's working, this is what's not working. I saw this because I was doing this job, so let's change this. And the boss say, that's a good idea. Let's do that. That sounds great. That's democracy at action, at work. And so we want a government that also does that, right? And then that way, because the 1% of the population that is trans within inside of Alabama, what part of those people are being able to stand up and say, this is actually the way that we would prefer the bathrooms to be? Instead of, right now, it's just two sides of no representation of those people, just saying, this is what we should do, and then the other saying, this is what we should. How about let's talk to the people? How about let's get the people's input about what to do, right? The same way with schools and the same way with food, the same way with, instead of the government, a bourgeois government kind of writes tax policy and they write these grants and stuff like that to like farmers, instead of saying, farmers, what do we need? type of thing. You know what I'm saying? We have lobbies, that go
Right.
around that instead of having all these things that, go against the grain of people, it's just politicking that we're not moving the needle on anything.
That's a real frustrating part of American politics is that it's supposed to be a representative democracy, but time and time again, you see like the majority of people are pro-abortion. The majority of people are pro this, pro that, and we're not representing the majority of what people want.
Right.
The majority of people don't want us handling the immigration crisis the way we're handling it now. They don't want to see like the LBGT community persecuted or gay marriage
Taken off the table.
Taken off the table. I mean, so
Right.
it's like, well, it just doesn't make sense. We're your constituents. You're not really listening to us. Can you explain to the audience what is DSA? What does it stand for? What are these meetings all about?
Yeah, so DSA is Democratic Socialist of America, and it came from a place called DSOC, and we don't have to get into details about that, but like, it's basically, we're organizing for a better future. We're organizing for universal health care. We're organizing for kind of the things that we were talking about, like the population wants one thing, but the capitalist class, the Republicans and Democrats, are doing another. And DSA says if we organize and we're strong enough, then we can push the system or take over the system and make a better future for everybody. We can have universal child care. We can have public transit. We can have a Green New Deal. We know that the way that society is operating is not only hurting and harming us as people, but it's hurting the world itself. We're killing the world. And capitalism doesn't care about that, but socialism cares about how we interact with the world and how we interact with each other. So let's put all of our brain powers together and come up with a collective solution, the same way that, like Mom Donnie's fast and free buses, he didn't come up with that idea. Somebody within inside the DSA chapter came up with that idea and said, what do you think about this? And he said, that's a great idea. Let's run on that because it'll help more New Yorkers, So DSA is about finding solutions to the current crisis that we have. The only fight against organized money, which is what we have going on here with the amount of money that's spent on politics, is organized people, and that's what we have to do. And every time that if you study history, and this is kind of where I got to DSA myself, if you study history, every time that something major happened for the working class people, an organization of people did it. It wasn't called DSA. It doesn't matter what it's called, but the reason why we had the March to Montgomery is because of organizing people. The reason why we had Freedom Riders in the South was organized people. The way we have an 8-hour workday now is because of the Haymarket riots in Chicago, which were organized people. They shut down Chicago for days, and had people in the street and just all sorts of every time you study this, working class people got something because they were organized, and DSA kind of aims to do that. If we are in our different places of online or even in person, and we all have the same frustration with the system, but we're not collectively in the same room, whether it's online or in real life, then we're never going to get the change that we want to have, right? And so, yeah.
Do you feel comfortable talking about the recent mayoral race in Mobile? Sure. I saw one clip where they were debating, and they were like, I think, what's your biggest issue? And the Republican candidate said something about stormwater, and the Democratic candidate, who you supported, correct?
Right.
Was talking about like after school programs and youth programs, and just exactly what you were just mentioning.
Right.
My first one would be youth violence. And I would first go in, and finances are the first things that I want to look at. Unfortunately, I didn't get answers to a lot of my questions, but I would certainly look at our finances to create a standalone department for the youth, to have a voice into our government, to make sure that they're able to know that we are there for them, because we're building our leaders for tomorrow.
I think stormwater management is a big one.
What did you see as some of the biggest, I know obviously the citizens of Mobile probably lost by far on election day, but what else kind of stood out in terms of that race as being crucial for?
Well, the biggest thing that I like about that, the overall of the race, is that it got more people organized. I definitely met a lot of people, and I know other people that I know met people. But the Democratic candidate, Barbara Drummond, lost by like 1,300 votes, which is a close margin. And so one thing that I know is the current mayor better have some concessions on progress and progressive ideology, or the vote will happen in 4 years, and he will be gone, right? If he doesn't deliver on things to be able to say, this is what I've done in the past 4 years, you know what I mean? Because the people are ready for a change of Mobile, you know, and I don't think that that's going to happen just because, you know, he's part of a grocery store chain in Mobile, and they have two separate names, you know, Greer's Marketplace and Greer's Cash Saver, if I'm not mistaken. And you can go to those two different chains and you can see the difference of like the segregation. It depends on what zip code the grocery store is in. There's tiles missing in some grocery stores, but there's exposed brick and a fresh market in some, and good produce in one and not even produce in the other. So it's like we're upholding the system from the 1950s still today, you know, even though it's not by law required. But if I owned a grocery store and I was concerned about helping all of Mobile, all of my grocery stores would be presented in the same way, have the same amount of food in each one, have the same style of food in each one, right? Because we know that food deserts are a thing, and we know that fresh, healthy food is one of the best ways that we as a people can do better and move up. And if it's not even offered in your area to a grocery store that you walk to, then are you really for the people of Mobile?
Well, I love the fact that you brought like the margin of victory there and how just slim it was.
Right.
But, you know, I had Dr. Will Boyd on a few weeks ago now. He made a bold statement. My favorite statement of the podcast was Alabama's a blue state.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, really, if you look across the country, you know, if we were to mobilize, if we were to show up in force, you know, at the ballot box, we would crush the Republican Party.
Right.
So, you know, this would be a great positive thing for this podcast if it inspired more people. If more people realize, like, I think they just feel like, because I hear it all the time among like my blue dot friends, are like, what's the point? What's the point in voting for Kamala Harris? She ain't going to win.
Right.
So what's the point?
Well, something that don't get me wrong, I supported Harris 100%, but Trump winning has helped radicalize people on the fact of the socialism versus capitalism argument, you know, because
I agree.
That's what we talk to a lot. We talk, well, what's the point? What's the point of it if neither one of them serve me in a way that makes sense? And something that I think Trump won on was either one of two things. Either one is you listen to his grocery conversation, he spoke to working class people. I'm going to lower gas prices. I'm going to lower grocery prices. He also spoke to racism and misogyny and homophobia. So it depends on which one of those got you activated to go to the voter box, but that's his voting base. So it's either hate from past generations that's been normalized, or it's working class problems of the country is too expensive to live in, you know, and too expensive in two ways, right? Either stuff costs too much money or you don't make enough money. And Alabama with no minimum wage on record, so we just go to the federal of $7.25. That's a problem. You know, that's a problem. The median income in Alabama is $33,000, which I send houses, which you do real estate, to people in other places it's a $200,000 house, $250,000 house, and they're like, yeah, but the problem with that house is I'd have to live in Alabama.
Yeah.
That's $1 million home on the West Coast, but I'd have to live in Alabama, you know, and it's like, you know, we have a tie to the state. I'm not leaving here. I'm going to continue to make the change because I know the people are here are working class folks, and they're interested in community. They're interested in changing the future, but we just have to break through the propaganda, the stories, the things that people get told about, you know, the same thing with, like, we spoke on pro-life and pro-choice. All of that's just a smoke and mirrors. No other country has that issue. No other developed country has laws against abortion because they know that it's health care. But it's been used and weaponized to get the vote out here. And that's $1 billion business. So we have to come up with something like what we're doing now to push back on that narrative of we just want people to be healthy. And sometimes that's an abortion. Sometimes it's a healthy birth, but sometimes it's an abortion, and we have to be okay with that, right? It's the same thing with, I use pulling teeth as that example, right? Nobody wants to lose teeth, but there's a lot of Alabama folks without 32.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? and that's because at the end of the day, something happened, and it's like, this is the best thing we got to do, so we got to get rid of it, That's kind of what abortion is about. At the end of the day, that's just the way to look at it. Not everybody is the same way of, people that, there's a lot of Alabama folks that look like this, right? My granddaddy was one of them. He had them two missing. It's not that he wanted to miss them by choice, but something happened and he got them gone, And so at the end of the day, it was leave them there and have an infection and him not be here, or take them and cut your losses and move on, right? And hope for the best in the future.
Well, I think we've exposed what's certainly going to be one of my favorite themes of this podcast is that the Trump 2.0, you can look at it as a blessing or a curse, but it really is a gift in a lot of ways in terms of shining a spotlight on what's wrong with America.
Right.
What's wrong with our mindset, what's wrong with our policies, what's wrong with the direction we're going in. Current policies aren't going to fix it. And so it just lends a really big microphone to folks like you who are speaking out on this. So that's a really key mindset a lot of us need to keep in mind is we're going through a correction here. Like in the real estate market, it goes through these corrections all the time. If things get too expensive, vice versa, it just corrects itself. When interest rates get too high, there's a correction. And the United States is going through a forced correction right now based off of greed, bad policies, and an underserved population.
Right. Well, capitalism thrives on that. They overproduce for a certain amount of time, and there's always a crash, and it kind of goes to the wayside of history, but anytime you start studying it, the Great Depression and the recession are two that stick out, but there was also the dot-com bubble. There was the gas crisis in the 70s. There's all sort of historical facts of we're always doing this under capitalism, and socialism tries to, because no one should be doing exponentially great while other people are all the way at the bottom. So let's try to bring those two kind of to an equilibrium. But the politics kind of has to change around that. So did we go so far because Trump is he's not the problem. He was the solution to the problem of what we thought was the problem. But capitalism in itself, after you uncover enough layers, that's the issue.
Yeah.
So is he going far enough in the current spectrum for more people to realize that the Red Scare was a scare and not anything to be concerned about? Something that socialism preaches is a full workforce, 100% employment. For anybody that can work, they should be employed. And that's something that conservatives agree with 100%. You hear them all the time say things like, food stamps or, they're lazy and they don't want to work. Well, socialism preaches basically you have a labor force, you have a government program set up, and any time that your job isn't working or anything like that, you go sign on with the government and the government puts you to work doing things. Like I'm an electrician by trade. So if I didn't have an electrical job, I would go get on and the government would have me, doing lights in government buildings and stuff like that. And that would be the workforce. And I would still be guaranteed a pay because I deserve to have a pay because I'm a living person. I deserve to be able to move in society. So instead of having unemployment pay, you would still just work until the private sector found you another job. You know what I mean? And that's something that I think if we explained it where it made sense, it would resonate with more people that are Trump supporters or conservative in the mindset, because at the end of the day, we have to create the system that does that instead of just demonizing anything that's different from the norm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, well, that's a good segue. We're going to do an even deeper dive on socialism on the other side of the break, so y'all stay with us.
Hey, fellow Blue Dots. Don't forget you can find all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Please hit that subscribe button and we would love a review. Okay, now back to the episode.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to do a deep dive into socialism, but we talk a lot on this podcast about exposure. So, I'm sure your mom welcoming all these people into your house at a young age has exposed you to different people. We talked about Mr. T.J. Ray. He exposed you to a different way of thinking, but you make it a point to travel to other countries, to spend time in other societies, to learn. And you just got back from Switzerland, and Switzerland is more of what we need to get to in terms of a socialist democracy. So what did you see over there that was different? I mean, we're talking about lifestyle, quality of life, and a lot of countries enjoy a quality of life that is superior to ours, where we have more money than they do. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, so Switzerland's, their social structure was set up around the movement of people, not product. Not profit wasn't on the forefront of the vision when you look at their day-to-day life. A lot of countries over there, they shut down from 2 to 5 p.m. because it's time for a break. And they don't care if you want to buy something or not. We're not working.
Yeah.
They don't have a minimum wage like we have, but they have such strong support in unions that have contracts with companies that it makes it where the bottom shelf of life is like $3,000 a month. Could you imagine how great our society would be if everybody was able to touch that amount of money every month? Shopkeepers and baristas, making that amount of money. And of course, no tipped labor either, because tipping is only a Southern thing, and it was built by slavery. Tipping itself comes from enslavement of Southern people. So other countries don't have that. So we don't have that type of labor. They have public transit at the forefront of every buses going everywhere and trains going everywhere, because they know that the best way to move people is with a publicly funded transit system that holds hundreds of people at a time, compared to the private ownership of cars and stuff like that. Not that you can't buy and own a car, but this other option that's easier for us to maintain and uphold, and doesn't create the oil change waste and the tire waste that we have here in the United States. So it's like everything is set up around the movement of individuals and people. Of course, they have a lot of things that we think here, like Second Amendment guns and stuff. They have a very high gun ownership also. Nobody's as high as the United States, don't get me wrong, but they don't have mass shootings. We've had more mass shootings this year than they've had deaths by guns in the last 20 years. Mass shootings, not just regular, not one-on-one crime, where somebody shot somebody with a gun, but mass shootings in the United States compared to 20 years of any gun death in Switzerland. And it's like, so are guns the problem? I don't think so, but is the society that produces people that don't value other folks the problem? Maybe that's where we need to lie it at, right? Because we've created a system that tells people that they're not good enough to make $3,000. They're not good enough to have access to public transportation. They're not good enough to have access to health care. So what did you leave them with? You didn't leave them with a lot of options for success now. So you've created a society that's set up to run on imprisonment and violence and theft and things like that. And then you criminalize those things. So it's like, and you didn't fix the problem by creating a society. And then when society breaks, you just demonize that individual person instead of saying, let's shift away from these things that are causing the inequalities to things that are better for folks,
Yeah.
So.
Well, what do you think, what are the biggest things you think people get wrong when they think or hear about socialism? Besides the fact that you're evil and you hate America.
They think I hate America.
They think it's communism,
right?
Or was it, it's a soft communism?
Yeah, well, and in the literature, when you study theory enough, like socialism is a lower phase of communism, because the way that it's taught and believed is, if you become socialist, then eventually you'll get to communist as an individual. You'll be enlightened to communism because you'll realize that the state itself is an oppressive structure. So if working class people take over the state and we set up the laws and regulations that govern us as individuals, true democracy, right? Like going back to the job example, if you didn't have a boss, but you just had 5 employees and all of them had the same amount of votes and the same amount of ability to make movement and have the other people check and correct you, then you'll end up with a job site that's better than any other job site because it's always going to be at least a 3-2, right? It's always going to be that on that job site. So you'll always be able to have more people. And then as that happens, because you don't want anything happening to you negative, you're not going to do anything negative to somebody else, right? So eventually, like, I don't need a law that tells me about gun violence to not shoot somebody. Like, my moral compass is there, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, the way that it's preached is if we become more and more socialist, we align ourselves more and more with just making sure that we aren't oppressing somebody else, right? We aren't making a society that counts other people out. And so that's the socialist, communist kind of thing. But how people react when they hear that I'm a socialist or what they think about socialism is usually a big misunderstanding.
Yeah.
You know, because socialism in itself is, like I said, taking care of folks. So if somebody passes in the community and you all bake goods for them and you bring, that's socialism because we're taking care of our neighbor. If you've cut your neighbor's grass or had your grass cut for free, that's socialism. You know, if you've watched somebody's kid, that's socialism because it's taking care of people instead of hiring a babysitter. You know, so every time that you do something that doesn't have a profit motive and it just has a people motive, then that's what the root of socialism is. And even the word itself, social to society, and communism for community. So the word communism comes from commune, which is the word for community. You know, so like all of them kind of go together. So if you had a rural village or town and y'all all just knew each other and you didn't do anything bad and you only wanted to do good stuff in there, like if a couple people grew stuff and a couple people taught school and a couple people fixed roofs and a couple people worked on cars, that's essentially a commune, a community, and communism, right? If you didn't trade any dollars with anybody, if you just kind of did what you needed to do and somebody had yard eggs and you just did this stuff, and that's communism 100%. And there's probably more people in Alabama that align with that without the word than we want to believe, you know?
I think the biggest misconception is that, I see it over and over again in memes and talking points online, is that socialism everybody gets everything for free. But you've already said, hey, this is a labor-driven society. You're working for what you have, but everybody has an opportunity to work.
Right. And so a socialist society deems to not have an overproduction and not have an underproduction at the same time, right? So, like, what's better to have? A regular car for everybody, if we need cars, right? Because we've already talked about public transit, or like really nice Cadillacs and Mercedes-Benz for only the people that can afford it and pay for it. Well, the socialist answer is if everybody just gets a regular Toyota Camry or, you know, Malibu or something like that, right? And the ones that need pickup trucks, they get Chevrolet or Ford pickup trucks. They don't get the fanciest, ginormous trucks, you know, they just get what we need to survive with, you know, and everybody kind of has access to that, right? And so it's more about taking care of the most amount of people as compared to allowing that, because I would argue that capitalism says when there's no stuff, right? Because if there's not a profit motive, you don't get stuff.
Yeah.
And so if we build it around profit motive, then it's better for capitalism if you overproduce for rich people and their food instead of producing cost-saving food for everybody. Because because poor people can't buy enough stuff because they don't have any money. So why would you do things to serve them? And that's why we have the homeless crisis that we have and the underserved crisis that we have, is because there's no profit motive in taking care of those people. Where socialism says it doesn't matter if they can pay for it or not. It matters that they have human decency and dignity and move with inside society, because not many people want to be without, you can't find anybody that wants to do without. So the rat race mentality that we've structured society around about always trying to do better, when those nice Mercedes and Cadillac cars get you here in Toyota Camrys, they get you there, right? So I would rather pass on the opportunity. I don't want to work 80 hours a week to afford a Mercedes when I can work 32 hours a week and drive a Camry and have all of my free time back, right? So.
Well, some person from an opposing position may say, well, Jeff, it sounds great and all, but the reason we have innovation, the reason we have advancement in society is because of profit motive. So if you take that away, what's my motivation for creating the next big thing, the newest version of the iPhone or whatever?
Well, the easy way to say that is, that's just debunked in itself, because creation happens usually with freedom. Nobody's ever been nose to the grindstone and thought of something or came up with something. I know that in my work experience in my life, I usually function better when I'm not stressed, when I'm not worried about the bills, when I'm not worried about if my car is going to make it home, because I've had those vehicles where, you got to push the truck out of the driveway to get going.
Right.
That's not a good place to think about the future, right? But innovation happens when there's an issue. And sometimes an issue doesn't have a profit motive behind it, right? The same way that just about everything that we've created now, it never had a profit motive to begin with, right? The internet didn't have a profit motive. Cell phones didn't have a profit motive.
Electricity.
Vaccines, electricity didn't have a profit motive. They were just about taking care of people, about this would be great if I could come up with a way that we didn't have to have candles anymore, right? If you could think about a way that, and there's some things that are profit, the assembly line might be one of them. Henry Ford thought of the assembly line and it helped progress in that way because he saw the profit motive. But vehicles weren't invented for a profit motive. They were invented for a better way to move around instead of horses. So there's always going to be that, electric cars have been around for over 100 years. And at one time an electric car held the world speed record, which is crazy to think about, in the 1930s, if I'm not mistaken. But what happened to that incentive to say, this is a better way? Well,
there's more money, no more gas.
Yeah, capitalism got in the way of saying, not so quick. We won't sell as much gas if you come up with an electric car, right? If you get profit motive out of the way, then you have an actual free exchange of ideas, and then you can come up and compete and find out which is going to be better for the future, as compared to just saying, this makes the most amount of money, so we should just keep doing it this way,
Such a great point you brought up about, if you've got your nose to the grindstone, if you're stressed out, if you're worried about how the light bill is going to get paid or the next meal is going to get put on the table, you don't really have time to be informed on the issues. This was a big, or still remains a big point of contention with the Democratic Party and its base, or the Democratic base versus the MAGA movement. It's why do you guys not inform yourselves? You talk to so many people on a daily basis, engaging with your audience. It's got to blow your mind that people literally have the internet in their palm of their hand and are still that uninformed.
Right.
So that's an excellent point. It's are they using it against us? Are they using it as a method of control?
Yeah, so I swore off cable TV and stuff before it became popular for that reason. And my mom passed in 2019, and her and I, we watched Alabama football together. But I was already kind of withering out about that, so I don't watch football or pro sports or anything like that anymore because of kind of what you're talking about. It's a distraction more than it is a relief, right? And so if you're nose to the grindstone 60, 70, 8 hours a week, then at some point you might want to say, I just want to chill. I just want to hang out. I just want to
drink some beers,
catch a
buzz and escape.
Yeah, just kind of escape. But at the end of the day, the society that we're in right now, the current crisis, doesn't allow for that. If we're not talking about it and not having the discussion of where are we going in the future, then we're doing a disservice to ourselves, especially people that are, I'm 36 and younger, and we're definitely doing a disservice to the next generation, right? And so to tie back to like my childhood, I'm trying to be, as a content creator, I'm trying to be the person that I wish that 14, 15, 16-year-old me would have saw. And I'm also trying to make sure that I'm changing the society to where that 14, 15, 16-year-old didn't have to look to somebody else and be like, maybe I can be there one day. You know what I'm saying? Because they shouldn't ever be in those shoes then, you know? You know, something that I relate to a lot, which might not always hit with everybody, but like the industrial military complex that we have. We should take care of our veterans, 100%. We also shouldn't really have that many veterans, right? We have a lot of foreign conflicts. And so like, if you just, in my opinion, every time you take like a couple steps back from the issue, we've identified an issue, and then let's take a couple steps back. Like we've identified that the immigration system is broken in the United States. Cool. Let's take a couple steps back and figure out, why are these people trying to come to the United States? Oh, because Peru has, you know, several military bases from the United States there, and we are oppressing their people. And so their people want to come to the United States because of the propaganda machine that the United States has that says, you might be able to get here, you might be able to succeed, you might be the one that breaks through. And that's the Trump house that you're talking about. You might be able to break through, and then you'll get to be the oppressor. Instead of saying, how about no oppression? How about nobody treads on other people at all, right? How do your rights and liberties and freedoms end where they start oppressing other people, right? Like that's the disconnect that we got to have. So it's like every time that we've identified a problem with, whether it's the military industrial complex, or whether it's immigration, or whether it's food itself, because we grow enough food, right? But we don't feed enough food people. So it's like the government is at the root of all of these things. The CIA, the FBI, the military, all of these government agencies that spend untold amounts of money making sure that the system is set up to where we continue to be the worker bees and we never get to have any honey. You know?
So much waste. I can't remember what state it was, but just enacted a law where they're going to start mandating that grocery stores not throw away so much shit. I mean, that they start giving it out to like food banks and things like that. I can't remember where that was. It was a blue state.
It's either California or New York, and I saw that same type of article too.
Yeah, It's crazy.
Oh, to go off of that though,
Yeah.
I have 20 odd chickens, and my brother works at a grocery store, and I'm his caregiver, so he brings home that produce that's too old to sell and stuff like that, and we feed it to our chickens and stuff, you know. And that's a way that we can kind of claw back, you know, working class people. We might not be able to fix every issue, but we're never going to fix any issue if we don't start with a issue. And that's just one way. Like that food was getting thrown away, and it's not fit to eat anymore. Don't get me wrong, it's wilted up, you know, cabbage and stuff, but it's a way that we cut down on feed cost and, you know, make eggs. You know, keep it from going to the landfill.
Absolutely.
So.
Politics of fear and hate are wrong. We love you and politics of
But America